My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Marco Prete. It's June 27, 2025, and we're at Wines of Kings in Portland. Marco, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the most important question. Why wine?
Well, I've been fond of wine since well before U.S. legal age, and that was possible because I was born in Italy, and at the time I lived in Italy, and in my teens I started being incredibly fascinated by wine. Obviously, wine is something that has a different connotation in Italy. It's part of the culture, is part of being together. You have lunch and dinners where your parents, your grandparents are at the table, and everyone has a glass of wine for lunch, a couple of glasses for dinner. No one thinks of wine as a way to get high. It's not, and you see grandpa have a glass for lunch and then go back to work, and it's part of everyone's life. So this is the kind of culture in which I grew up, and for whatever reason, it resonated with me incredibly. So by the time I had a driver license and a car, one of the very first things I did was drive and reach out and meet some of the top winemakers of the time, because I had their wines and I thought that their wines were really interesting and different from their neighbors, and I was curious to ask how did they make them, why those wines were different. Was also a fortunate time in a way, because those figures that currently superstars and in a way hard to reach at the time were more approachable, and some thought that a young kid curious with questions was someone they would be willing to spend some time with. So I became friends with many, and some have been deep inspirations, and the work that we're doing here today is clearly built upon thousands of years of winemaking, but specifically, certainly, some of these inspirations.
So before we go on, tell me a little bit more about kind of outside of wine, early life in Italy. What are your sort of memories of growing up?
Growing up in Italy was probably not much different than growing up here. I lived in Milan, so an urban setting, and went to Montessori school, which I thought was really important for my education. I always see that as the most important school I ever went to, even if I went through college. But I see Montessori as the school that changed my life. I started traveling abroad, first to England and then to the US to learn English like other kids, probably earlier than other kids. Not because at the time there was any sense that I would move here, but simply because my parents initially thought that it would be useful for me to learn English. Mm-hmm. Eventually, the way I ended up in the U.S. Was that in the late 90s, was named on the board of directors of a biotech company in New Haven, Connecticut. Probably my knowledge of English was instrumental in the investor picking me as his representative. And I sensed that that was a good opportunity for me to develop further connections. And so I lingered on those trips longer than it would be necessary just for the board in order for potential connection to develop. And ultimately, I met a hedge fund who was looking for ways to expand their presence in Europe, and candidated myself as a potential partner to develop that business. that became a significant venture that developed across multiple European countries and was the bulk of our activity for quite a bit of time. Eventually, in 2008, I started thinking that with the financial crisis, I started thinking that it would be probably a better idea to move the family to the US, and it took us a few years to pull that off until 2013 when we all moved, me, my wife, and two daughters who at the time were in 8th and 12th grade. Clearly, I mean, from year 2000 to then, I was coming back and forth almost every month. So New York City was a sort of second home to me. So it wasn't very difficult to move. It wasn't an unfamiliar place. It was at that point almost as familiar as Italy. And I can say that life in a big city is completely different in a way. It's not that different. So that's kind of a background of sorts.
So tell me about as you were sort of approaching college. Tell me about your decision to go to school and what your plan was for your career.
Well, I went to business school, and I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always felt that that urge, that motivation, and probably I feel I wouldn't be able to thrive in a corporate environment in general. Soon enough, I ended up in the financial industry and started managing money. It's a venture where we focused initially on convertible debt and equity purchases on small stocks across European exchanges, with a strategy that was well-trodden here and highly regulated, but was lightly, if at all, regulated in Europe. And so there were many opportunities that we could exploit. And in a way, country-by-country regulation followed us as we developed the business. Clearly, over the years, more regulation and certainly also more competition, especially from traditional commercial banks whose cost of capital is way cheaper than what we were aiming for, pushed us to look elsewhere. And the opportunity for a radical new focus came around 2012 when we started focusing on renewable energy. We felt that the way the market was designed would bring significant potential yields, and we started working in the space then. And over the years, we have developed a significant portfolio. At this point, 6-7 years ago, we stopped managing other investors' money, and that portfolio has ended up in a portfolio of solar farms that my wife and I own. That's mostly what my wife, Christina, runs at this point. It's also the source of resources that have allowed us to make the necessary investment to develop a winery and vineyards in Oregon. Because as you know, winemaking in general requires a significant upfront outlay of cash before you can reap the benefits.
So you mentioned obviously wine being part of your life all along. Tell me about, as you were pursuing your main career, how did wine sort of, what role did wine play in your life?
Well, we never thought we would work in the space until a number of years ago, but wine was always dominant in terms of focus, attention, and time. My wife and I would spend first of all, we met in college, so we've been together for a very long time. And we shared that passion, and we would spend all free time and vacations in vineyards and cellars with winemakers, talking about what they were doing and tasting and discussing. And in particular, one winemaker who is widely considered to be the top winemaker Italy has ever seen, Gianfranco Soldera, for about 20 years was my best friend, and I believe I was his best friend. And we spent an inordinate amount of time together. I even brought him on the board of our business ventures, but the amount of time we spent together with the girls, granddaughters, has taught me a lot of what we're applying here, for sure. Has been, for sure, the major influence on the work that we're doing here. Obviously, you learn and you study and you try to push it forward, but certainly he has been by far the main influence. I must say, there's another influence which came even before him, and in a way it's the first love, which is always unforgettable, and in a way it's a starting point of our whites. The very first producer that I wanted to meet when I started meeting producers as still, sort of a kid still, was Josko Gravner in Gorizia. And the way he approached in general winemaking and his whites specifically certainly is a colossal inspiration to the work that we're doing right now.
So what was your first sort of business entry into wine?
Well, the very first business entry, besides, after I started working with U.S. investors invested in European strategies and coming back and forth, a number of wineries I was friends with asked me if I could put them in contact with importers. So for a while that wasn't really a business, it was more connections and friendship and whatnot, but we did a number of importing contracts. We set up a number of those for Italian wineries until about 8 years ago, when with Gianfranco Soldera, we decided to start a wine importing business, which initially was designed to be focused on his wines. And this was the predecessor to Wines of Kings. Now, obviously, Wines of Kings has expanded dramatically and clearly features about 1,500 labels, so way beyond having just Soldera wines. But that was the initial inspiration where we started. And then this leads to how we came to the idea of producing an Oregon. It's one of those coincidences, but during COVID, by chance, I bought a bottle of Jim Marsh Dundee Hills in Brooklyn. And I thought that I really wanted to see the place where that bottle came from. I wasn't familiar with Oregon Pinot Noir, and I thought that the bottle was interesting enough to put me on a plane and come here. And when I came here, I thought that there was a colossal opportunity to make a world-class wine in the U.S. And I spoke with Christine and discussed whether we would focus on this at this point of our life. And she supported me wholeheartedly, and we started. I drove across the state extensively. I found a property that I thought was phenomenal for grape growing south of McMinnville, really close to Highland, sort of twin to Highland in a way, because it's the next hill, and it's very similar in size and shape. Although I've never been to Highland, so I wouldn't be able to say whether the soil is identical. Property we bought has Jory soil, although it's in McMinnville AVA. It looks a lot soil-wise as Dundee Hills, so to speak. It has that reddish clay. And so we started operations to develop a vineyard, knowing that would take years, obviously, before we would have any feasible production. And then by chance, Jim Marsh and I became friends. And again, when I bought his first bottle in Brooklyn, I wouldn't know. And he kindly offered to lease me parts of his vineyard. And this is how we started producing. So the bottles that you just saw, the 2022 Chardonnay, 2023 Riesling, and 2023 Pinot Noir, come from Marsh Vineyard. They have been produced from vines planted in 1970 by Jim's grandfather and Martha, Jim's mom. And it's a phenomenal property, to say the least, and I feel honored to be able to work on that property. But meanwhile, we're still working on our vineyard development, and one day we'll be able to produce from our vineyard as well. But yeah, for the time being, that source has been extraordinary in quality, and a colossal opportunity for us. I'm forever thankful to my friend Jim for this.
That's a pretty good friendship to make.
Yeah, it's how things in life work, because again, you can't decide to make friends with someone. So it's a coincidence, a way some people click. It's we evidently, when we met, we realized we shared lots of interests, and we probably looked at good wines in a similar way. And so I thought he was intrigued by seeing what I could pull off from his vineyard. And clearly, we're doing stuff in really different styles. So that also was, in a way, an opportunity for him to broaden his views of what could be done from his property.
So I have many more questions about that, but I want to back up for a second, talk about Wines of Kings for a minute, and about the growth of that business. So tell me about, you mentioned it as it started with a pretty small scope.
Yes.
Tell me about growing it and.
Well, the idea initially was not as much to take advantage of less intermediaries, but more than anything, if you're a winery, you would love, especially if you're a high-end winery making few bottles that cost a significant amount of money, it's important for you to understand where these bottles end. And the free-tier system does not allow you to track those, because honestly, no one knows. Once you sell them to an importer, the importer tries as well as they can to sell them to wholesalers across the country, and no one knows where the bottles are, whether they are sold at restaurants, private collectors, liquor stores, still in the inventory of a wholesaler here or there. Clearly, what certain producers want is to be able to have a more direct connection with their customers, and that is true for small producers like Soldera, who makes 10 to 20,000 bottles per year, to producers like Antinori. I'm aware that Antinori as well is trying for his top end of a production to have a more direct presence and understand better who drinks it and develop a sort of connection with them. So I think it's across the board very important. And so this is how, and Oregon allowed us, with a bit more flexibility and regulations, to consolidate those licenses and legally import and distribute those products. Clearly, we leveraged also on a wide network of connections that we have in Europe, and so we were able to source wines and producers that are really hard to find. And over the years, clearly, we have accumulated an inventory of old vintages that is quite unrivaled in the US. So typically, our clients are people who are looking for high-end wines, oftentimes hard to find vintages, and we are able to provide that. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, clearly, we give feedback to the wineries. We explain where the wine goes, where it's sold, where it's higher in demand, and so on. And that information is valuable to the wineries as well.
You mentioned obviously having connections to help you build this. What are you looking for when it comes to on the producer side? What are sort of the markers of the producers you want to import?
Well, I always say we're not really able to sell anything, but wines sell themselves. So I don't think we're really great. We constantly have pressure from lesser-known producers to import their wines. Even if we did, we don't really have a way to corral customers around less-known wines. We are simply known in the realm of high-end collectors as people who reliably can supply certain wines, can find vintages, can guarantee the authenticity of the bottles. We do ship everything via air, so that's almost unique. I feel that is valuable because clearly wine that sits in a container for months suffers, and then moves from warehouse to warehouse suffers, and you don't know when you buy a bottle whether it's been in the store window under the sun for a while before it's brought back to a shelf. So I feel in general having the wine move from the winery cellar to a cellar and then to a plane and then to the customer's home is in general a better process. At the same time, obviously, it's a more expensive process, significantly more expensive, and so unavoidably we ended up focusing on the high-end segment of the market. Partially, it's where we had where I had the tighter connections, where this level of care made more sense, but also where this ridiculous expense per bottle can be more easily amortized. It's irrelevant on a $1,000 bottle. On a cheap bottle, I mean, even if we didn't pay for it, it might be a loss simply for the sheer amount of money that takes to bring it here. So this is basically the reason why we don't carry anything under $100, and even the $100 bottle is relatively cheap for us, given the expense of shipping it via air directly. We certainly see a good amount of synergy between what we produce and Wines of Kings in terms of customers, because basically we're chasing the same customers. So we feel, and with BHN, what we're doing as we are starting promoting the wines, it's for most part dinners where clients have the opportunity to taste the wines. The way both dinners are designed is inspired by actually Maggie from Antica Terra, and I went to tasting, and I thought that the way she designed those tasting was really well done. I enjoyed it immensely. I told her, she knows, and we're trying to do something similar, obviously leveraging on our import portfolio. So typically a dinner has a vintage champagne, 2 or 3 of our bottles, and then 2 or 3 bottles of high-end European wine. Sometimes it's a high-end European wine and a high-end American wine. We recently had a dinner where we poured Scarecrow and Dormaggi, which is Angelo Gaia's Cabernet, to sort of expose our clients to a comparison between Old World and New World Cabernet. And for Angelo, we had a 30-year-old Magnum of Dormaggi, so it was also the opportunity to expose them to old wine, which is very uncommon. It's rare even among higher-end buyers in America for them to have any knowledge of what aged wine tastes like, and I thought that was interesting as well. So we try to make it engaging. We feel that our wines are put in better perspective if they're tasted alongside other high-end wines. And we also feel that if the design of a tasting is ever-changing and always intriguing, you may want to come more than once in a year, because you're not only tasting our wines, but you're joining in something that's fun and interesting and every time different. Clearly, we try to spin it on the enjoyment and the entertainment versus the educational part, because we feel that people like it more. Obviously, I'm usually present at the dinners, and I can answer any technical question, but we also feel that the entertaining part of a night is very significant for these kind of customers, and so it needs the educational part need to be corralled and limited to what people really want to know if they ask.
You brought up authenticity as obviously an issue in high-end wine. I'm curious about your experiences with that, being in that kind of market. Have you run across issues with authenticity?
We only source wine from either wineries or incredibly established merchants who typically have been in business for multiple decades and we've done business with for a very long time. We don't buy from private collectors. We are always offered collections, but I feel we do not have the organization to go and assess the authenticity of each bottle. And with again, wineries, obviously, it goes without saying, but even those merchants are people who have bought their inventory directly from wineries. So we're just one step removed, and that means a limited number of operators, typically in London and Bordeaux, who again, we trust based on the reputation, number of years in business, amount of inventory, and number of years we have done business with. Mm-hmm. Honestly, the total number of issues we had since we started this business is 0. Mm-hmm. We never had a bottle where we doubted the authenticity. Mm-hmm. But again, it's a matter of the amount of risk you want to take. And clearly, if you buy private collections, you may make more margin, but the risk you're taking is completely different. We're not I don't think we're designed for that. In general, our financial inventors are very much risk averse, which is what has proven successful for us. Again, other people are more risk inclined, and they've been successful as well. It's probably my personality, my psychology that is less inclined to risk, and so we don't. We're not thrilled about buying a wine cheaply to make more margin. We rather go the right path, down the right path, and it costs what it costs, and that's fine.
So I'm curious about your vineyard. You mentioned obviously being intrigued by Oregon from a bottle, coming out and visiting. Tell me what the steps for you kind of mentally from visiting Oregon to wanting to buy property here. What was it about the visit that made you want to invest?
Oh yeah, there's a few things that make a place unique to make wine. It's a combination of climate, soil, and certainly for very best vineyards, there's a certain brightness of a light that it's a phenomenon hard to describe, but it's one of those things that once you see it, you recognize it. And if you have visited most of the top vineyards in the world, you find a certain common thread, and I feel that the common thread is a certain uniqueness of a light, and I saw that on the property we bought. And then there's practical consideration. You need a certain slope for both light exposure and to allow cooler air to flow downhill. You need to have soil that has some water retention, so you'll be able to dry farm and have roots go deep. All of this, can be summarized in the general philosophy where wine is made in the vineyard. It's not made in the winery. In the winery, you can only destroy it, but you can't improve it. So you need to start on the right foot, and this is why our focus on the vineyard was kind of obsessive. The whole point of being here is the opportunity of finding vineyards that are of this incredible quality and are not necessarily recognized because, again, in Europe, there's a minute knowledge inch by inch in certain areas about the quality for wine production of the properties, and here that is not yet as consolidated, to put it mildly. But I jokingly say that if you're fortunate enough to visit Romane Conti, they have a document that is over 800 years old and the document is signed by the head of the abbey, which at the time owned the property. And that man at the time wrote to the people working for him, the wine that comes from that vineyard, and we're talking about Romane Conti, don't blend it with the others because it's better. I feel that is one of the testaments to terroir. Terroir isn't an invention. 800 years ago, someone realized that a certain block, and we're talking about a block that's couple of acres in total, so not a large block, was so much better that the wine that came from it should be kept aside and drank in more important occasions. So I feel that that minute knowledge isn't yet present here. In a way, I felt a bit like how Gianfranco Soldera felt when he landed in Montalcino in the early 70s. He was friend with Giovanni Conterno, the father of Roberto, and for a while he looked around Barolo to find a suitable property to buy. But Barolo is an area that has been known as great for winemaking for much longer than Montalcino. So the best plots were all taken and would have been too expensive for Franco to buy. And he ended up in Montalcino, where at the time, a bit like here in a way, there was limited knowledge about what was better, what wasn't, and so still there was some opportunity to reap. The property he bought had olive trees at the time, wasn't vined, and the property I bought had Christmas trees, wasn't vined either. But in a way, I felt I was following the steps of my friend, obviously far away from where he started, but still with a similar philosophy, if you wish.
So you mentioned a couple of things about the site. Obviously, you mentioned this jory soil. You mentioned you kind of saw it in the light that made you excited about it. Tell me a little bit more about the terroir of the space as you started to plant there. What have you planted, and what is sort of the timeline for the vineyard?
Well, by the time we prepped it, we also had the first vintages at Marsh, which informed us better of something that I had in mind, but wouldn't know whether it would work or not. Specifically, making a 100% botrytized wine and fermenting it bone dry without any chemical help. That was something that I hoped I would be able to do, but had no point of reference and wasn't sure. After the first success on Marsh Vineyard, that clearly informed a number of future blocks on our property. I feel in general that not all varietals are equally great, and not all clones within a varietal are equally great. So differently from others, we are planting a single clone per varietal, and only the varietals that we feel are able to bring fruition to a product that we enjoy. Mm-hmm. So we're planting Pinot Noir, and specifically Wading's Wheel Clone 2A. We're planting Chardonnay, specifically 548. And we're planting Riesling, which again has proved to be quite interesting, and a Mosel clone. And we will be planting Sauvignon Blanc, and we'll plant Clone 1, which is more commonly known as the New Zealand clone. We're planting the whites in an area where we feel humidity can linger more, which will be helpful in spreading botrytis, and Pinot Noir on the uppermost part of a property.
So that jumps ahead a little bit. You're talking about your sort of your unique winemaking philosophy, or winemaking at least experiment. So tell us a little bit about how you got this idea to use botrytis, bone dry, and in your early experiments with it.
Well, it's a combination of different pieces. I believe that whites with skin contacts gain way more richness. In general, I believe that the richest part of the grapes are the skins. And in a way, not that I do enjoy whites that are made by without skin contact, but I feel that while they're enjoyable to drink, they lack the depth and complexity that you get from a skin contribution. And in general, I feel that's the reason why traditionally whites were considered lesser and on average, again, we can come up with a number of exceptions, but on average are cheaper and are more of a casual drink, and the important wines tended to be reds. I feel that it's not that white grapes in general, white varietals are inferior, it's simply that the contribution from the skin is missing, and I feel that's important. In general, it's been an experience from multiple producers, certainly Grafner, but others in Europe as well, where botrytis brings this sort of otherworldly component to it. Again, after this interview, I'm delighted for you to taste what they're doing, because I feel that it's easier to realize this in a tasting than to describe it artificially without wine in front of us. But I always felt that that component, whether a sprinkle on dry wines or a lot of it on sweet wines, and obviously Chem is a point of reference there, I always adored that contribution. So I felt that if we could do a skin contact wine with a philosophy similar to what Josko does, so 6 months with skins, contributing with stems, because I feel that the stems cut at the right point bring a tannin component that is important for the wine, but also bringing botrytis would sort of elevate the complexity to a further level. And it was my hope that I would be able to ferment it bone dry, and it was my hope that the overall result would be something that would be enjoyable with a meal. All of that was the initial thought, which in general is part of the fact that when it's night and I go to bed, I dream of wine. So this is, and I spend an inordinate amount of time studying, but at night dreaming about wine and thinking about tweaks and ideas, and this is how this comes together. So that's how we started, and clearly, again, every year we do, as I said, a number of experiments. Some are few are super successful from the start, but most are not, but most are informative. So what works and what doesn't informs us of the next steps. So what you see in a bottle under the BHN label is just the tip of the iceberg of a number of experiments where only those we're completely proud of and delighted with our bottle under BHN label, and the rest is a phenomenal lesson that may eventually inform a future BHN wine down the road.
So let's talk about let's talk about what's gotten into the bottle so far. Tell me about the initial grapes you got from Jim Martin.
Yes.
And what you thought of the initial results.
Oh yeah. Well, what we decided to bottle is a Pinot Noir, where we focused on elegance and discipline and attention. So incredibly low yields, but and I feel having a sort of different approach with harvest date is really important. My background is that you don't look at bricks. You're not aiming for a certain alcohol content. You look at phenolic ripeness. You look at you taste the seeds, and the seeds inform you of the exact moment when the grapes should be harvested. And I feel that for the red, the obsession, the precision makes that moment flimsy, and it's the exact day, and especially if a season is relatively warm, you cannot miss that day. If you harvest it 1 day later, it's already worse. If it's 2 or 3 days later, it's significantly different. So you really need to nail the date. And for that, obviously, we're thankful to the group of harvesters that helped us and were flexible enough to accommodate our request. Clearly, I feel that limiting the yield is really important. So we feel that on a good vintage is a lot if one can make 1,000 bottles from an acre. With the whites, we actually produce about 400 to 500 bottles from an acre. So that's the kind of yield we get. Obviously, botrytis doesn't help with yield, but yield is not a focus for us. It's just obsessive quality. It's bottles where you pour a glass and you remember it forever. That's what we want the wine to be. We're not looking to make a lot of wine. It's meaningless. And if a wine isn't something we're totally proud of, we don't bottle it. We have no need to bottle mediocre. There's plenty of mediocre wine around. We don't need to contribute to that with more mediocre wine. So that's basically where we are. And vintage to vintage, we again, with the experiments, some stuff gets bottled, some doesn't, and we try to use the failures as our opportunities to learn and improve.
So you showed us some of the wines that are in the back now. Tell me about your thoughts on them, given all the things, all the factors you put into them. What is the result?
Oh, the wine that is in the bottle is a wine I'm really proud of. It's wine that I dreamt of before it existed, and I'm delighted. And every glass of it, every time I have a tasting and I taste some, I'm delighted. I'm really, really happy with. And I'm pretty sure, again, in a few minutes when we'll taste them together, you'll understand why I am so.
So you mentioned, obviously, you're not making a lot of wine, you're going for high quality. So tell me about, once you have it into the market, what is your kind of goal for where it ends up?
The whole point for me is to develop a market that allows such an obsessive way of producing to be sustainable over time. We don't see this as a money-making venture, but we see the money necessary to continue making wine in an obsessive way that's in line with what we've been doing right now, and to be able to make the necessary investment to develop that obsessiveness further. So that's kind of a goal. We feel that for wines that are so different, the only way to and clearly for a winery that's not established, the only way to market them is to have in-person events where those wines are poured. And we feel that if they're poured alongside other high-end wines, that is a great way to display them. And the feedback we had from the events we have attended is phenomenal. We had people really like them and order them, and so we feel that this is the right step. Obviously, developing a direct market for wines takes time, and we understand that. But again, we'll be here next year and the following, so we're now in no rush.
So you're sitting in front of some clay vessels here. So tell us about your fermentation process.
Yeah, it's a fun story because I mean, initially what I was planning to do was actually age wine in large oak casks, which is what you would find in Montalcino, in Barolo, and and in part also your Grauner uses oak casks. And we ordered some from Garbellotto, the oldest maker of all oak casks in Italy, and they were damaged in transit, and we couldn't take delivery. At the same time, I was obviously very aware of the experiments with clay, and because Josko has sort of pioneered aging in clay from Georgian vessels, bought initially at a time when you would risk your life bringing them back. And this company, Tava, has patented a process where vessels can be ordered at different porosity levels depending on the temperature of a clyn. Most clay containers are too porous, and so you can't age wine for much, for long, because wine tends to oxidize. I thought that if I could make it with a porosity similar to a large oak cask, that would probably be a worthwhile experiment. The underlying idea is you add nothing in the vineyard, you add nothing in the winery, and to keep the purity of the fruit, you don't age in barrels, because obviously barrels do contribute to the flavor. And again, to the same philosophy, the way I grew up, any contribution is a negative. So I thought, let's put a few of these on a plane. We're pretty good at flying in wine, so the first ones, we were tight on time. We put them on a plane and we flew them in. We really liked the result. We had a number of observations, so we actually made changes in the design of them that the producer was kind enough to implement. So you'll see some of them. This is the old version, and we realized that with a wider triclover closure, it would be better. We designed the new lid with the same closure. We designed some gas contraptions to keep content gassed if it's not full to the brim. We designed a few modifications, but in general, this has proved to be a lovely neutral container we're really happy with. So we started with a few, and now we have quite a bit, and we'll have more coming.
So you mentioned, obviously, any addition is something you're trying to avoid. So tell me about how your wines ferment and age.
Oh, they simply, the reds ferment for about a month and a half on skins and stems. And then they're racked. The whites ferment 6 to 8 months on skins and stems, and then they're racked. The only contribution, the only addition we use in the winery is sulfites, just a tiny bit, because as Josko says, wine natural state is vinegar. If you add 0 sulfites, ultimately you'll get vinegar, because that's the natural state. So we artificially keep wine in limbo in wine state by adding a tiny bit of sulfites. I feel also that the technical achievement of DM closures allows a significant reduction in the necessary sulfites that allow you to keep wine in its state for a very long time. For our whites, both the way they're done and the higher alcohol level leads me to believe that they will have indefinite lifespan at that alcohol level, and the way we make them, it's hard to imagine them being damaged by time.
You mentioned the alcohol level, so tell me the alcohol level for some of the wines you're making.
Again, we're not pursuing high alcohol, and all in all, I feel it's a matter of balance. So again, you need to taste the wines to get a sense whether you feel, sometimes with a much lower level of alcohol, you would feel a wine as jammy or overripe. Current production, I mean, what we have on the market and we're labeling, we have a Chardonnay at 17.1 and a Pinot Noir and a Riesling both at 15.5. Again, I am ready to bet that if I didn't tell you those alcohol levels and you had those wines, you would never guess them.
So in addition to still wine, you were making some other interesting things back there. So tell me about your other.
Oh, for sure.
Going on back there.
Yeah. That was another experiment. Obviously, we make pretty unique whites, to put it mildly, and at the end of the 6, 7, 8 months of skin contacts, those skins are as rich as ever in aromas, and. I've always been intrigued about finding a way to crystallize that wealth, but also to reach a certain customer base that is common in the US, not as much in Europe, who is more familiar with whiskey than wine. And try to bridge that gap and bring this complexity into the realm of someone who usually does not drink wine. But might be interested and intrigued by this complexity of aromas. And so we're producing currently 2 products, a Chardonnay rye and a Riesling rye, which are infusions of those skins and stems with pure rye moonshine that comes from an organic rye grower. That combination of skin stems and rye moonshine ages for 2 years in a similar vessel, so no wood char contact. And again, you'll see it in a minute. After 2 years, so you have something that is dark amber in color like a Scotch, has the complexity of noble rot infected Riesling or Chardonnay, but it's a rye at 45% alcohol. We feel that there's a market space for that, and we feel that we can sort of broaden the interest towards wine with a high-end product of that nature that talks to whiskey drinkers. So again, it started as a tiny experiment. We liked what we saw the first year. We did more, and people who tasted it really enjoyed it. So I think we're up to something.
It's a pretty unique concept there. So
it's completely unique. I mean, we're actually working with a law firm and TTB to find a way to label those products in a way that still conveys the exact content of a bottle to the consumer, given that current regulations are pretty tight, and this actually straddles across 2 spaces that usually don't talk to each other. Wine and spirits, obviously.
So I'm curious about, you mentioned how Oregon came to be on your map. Tell me about starting to get to know the industry here a little bit. What have been your impressions of the Oregon wine industry, the people, and the wines coming out of Oregon since you've been aware of the industry here?
Well, in general, I feel it's alongside the general Oregon vibe of friendliness and collaboration. I feel it's pretty unique in that sense, where in other places across the globe, typically a winemaker feels that every other winemaker is competition and needs to die in order for him to be able to sell his wines. Here, it feels more of a team effort, and you feel there's way more collaboration and interest of doing things together and understanding that raising tide lifts all boats. So if Oregon becomes more visible on a map, that brings wealth to all Oregon producers, no matter what, which is why we proudly feature Oregon on the front of a label and hope to bring more visibility to Oregon, and are delighted to have winemakers visit and tell our story, and happy to help anyone that needs help.
I'm curious, as you've brought winemakers in here and you've explained to them your process, what have been the reactions you've gotten?
Well, I think utmost curiosity, for sure. Clearly, many have to tackle a completely different problem, which fortunately we don't have, which is consistency vintage to vintage and volumes of production. For us, volumes are irrelevant, and we are delighted if vintage to vintage wines taste different because the vintage was different. In a way, I feel eerie when I taste wines that taste identical in different vintages. But obviously, if you work for a winery that produces 1 million bottles instead of a few thousand, you're under a different obligation of consistency, and probably most of your customers want to smoothly transition between vintages without surprises. They want the same exact hue of pink in the rosé wines. And all of that can be achieved only if most of the work is done in the winery. And it's kind of counter our philosophy, but I do understand that the market is big and there's room for everyone. I simply try to do my best, and I'm delighted to show what I'm doing to others, that's all. But clearly, again, if you need to make a lot of wine and make it reasonably good enough, obviously constraints are completely different. And you can't imagine to do it the way we do it. And you obviously, on different volumes, you can't afford to say, oh, we're not bottling this. So obviously, you operate under different constraints.
Tell me about some of the experiments you are in the process of right now and things that might be coming to your wines in the future.
Well, one of the things we have been playing with is, I mean, besides the simplest experiment, if you wish, is broadening our wine portfolio with another phenomenal white varietal, which is Sauvignon Blanc, and that will be coming in the future. But a different level of experiment revolves around reds, specifically thinking about a bolder red than what you can get from Pinot Noir, where I adore the elegance, and in general I feel Pinot Noir is hard to beat as a red, but for complexity. But sometimes you may want a bolder American wine. And how do you make it and keep it also intellectually intriguing? And I've been playing with this idea for a long time. And we're playing with the idea of drying grapes, Amarone style. We've already done a vintage with dried grapes. I think we learned a lot on that vintage, and we'll be perfecting the strategy. But in the future, there'll be, I expect us to produce a bolder red with an Amarone style process. So that's something that we have in the pipeline.
Always pushing.
Oh, for sure. That's exactly, I mean, we need to push every day. Every day we need to say what we've done until today isn't sufficient. How can we improve it? How can we tweak it? How can we make the next vintage the best we've ever done? When people interviewed Enzo Ferrari and asked him what car was he most proud of, he always said, the next one. That's kind of how we see it. We see the next vintage as our opportunity to push this further.
So let's look ahead to the future for you a little bit. Is there anything else on the horizon for you personally or professionally that you're excited about?
I dream of wine. I'm excited about what we're doing here. 2025 looks like a very intriguing vintage. We have lots of new stuff going on, and we can't wait to see what we bring in from a vineyard.
Excellent. Last question for you. What is your greatest achievement or proudest accomplishment so far?
Well, I mean, I feel winemaking is really a team effort. So I never associate the wines to myself alone. I feel that community effort from Lucas to the harvesters to everyone, to Jim Marsh, to our friends and mentors, winemakers across the globe. I feel all of these bits contribute significantly. Last summer, I spent quite a bit of time at ICAM understanding their strategies for botrytis, because obviously I thought that they would be the masters of a topic, and I learned a lot. I spent a lovely day with Egon Müller talking about his Rieslings, and I think I learned a lot, and a number of ideas that I gathered from those conversations we try to apply. So I'm about to leave for Europe, and we'll be in Europe for most of July, and I'm sure I learned something that I don't know yet that we'll try to apply. I feel that, I'm really proud of what we have bottled, and I feel that is, the result of this team effort, and our duty is simply to push forward and make it better.
All right. All the questions that I have, anything I didn't ask that I should have, anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
I thank you so much for being here. I don't think I have much more, but it was lovely talking with you.
It was lovely talking with you as well. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your space, and looking forward to trying your wines. And
oh yeah, let's get to it. I'm sorry that the viewers will not see that.
Thank you so much. I'll let you off the hook.